Hello, this is Brian from the Bad Manners podcast. I'm going to be reacting to another video from Metatron. This one's titled, Why Do We Keep Letting This Happen? I'm pretty sure that one of the things he mentions has something to do with educators, and given that I am an educator, this is of course going to be of interest to me, so let's get into it.
And one has to do again with race, unfortunately. Because if I don't call it out, who does? Check this article. Denisha Maddy is the clown we're gonna call out today. So, black teaching assistant brags about grading white students in Chicago based on race. Okay, newsletter.
Just going off the title of that, as an educator, this is actually going to do two things. Obviously, there's the racial angle, and it's going to attempt to suppress the feelings of white students about their work. But I want to actually emphasize its counterpart. If she is inflating the grades of other students, then she is giving them an impression of their abilities that doesn't actually line up with reality. So hilariously, if one were to do that, the end result would be that you're giving them a false impression of ability they don't have, so they're in fact going to be less prepared when they move on to the next step in whatever it is they're doing, which will be harmful to them. So in the end, you'd end up being racist against the group you were trying to elevate because you achieved ends harmful to them. Now, maybe in the article we'll talk about whether she did that or not, but I can't help but wonder whether or not her suppressing the grades of one group might have led to her elevating the grades of her group. But let's see.
Let's see what this is about. Denisha Maddy is a graduate teaching assistant at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. Yeah, professional. Who seemingly bragged on Twitter about grading papers based on students' race. In response, the school is investigating the situation and has taken action. So,
Okay. Given the little quote they have before where she singles out white students, I at this point I'm inclined, if this is her moral character and she has an animus against a particular group, I'm certainly inclined to believe that she's going to seek to elevate her own group. So that point I made earlier about her hilariously possibly causing inferior practical outcomes for her own in-group could very much be a reality.
Props to the school. I'm gonna have to say this. Props to the school. Who on earth does this? Like what? Is this the reversed 1940s? It's literally the reverse. They're doing the same thing. The reverse 1940s. Was it even a thing in the 1940s? I don't even know. If grading was dependent, even in situations where we know that, for example, in America, 40s, 50s, it was really tough being a black person. I mean, that's a historical fact.
So, I went to college not too long ago to get my degree in elementary and special education. And a real genuine fear that some cohort members of mine had was that if they voiced their true opinions or ended up voicing an opinion that ran counter to what that professor wanted to see, especially when we would have these lessons near the end of a semester where we always had at least one lesson per class that was somehow focused on white man bad. You would wonder how it has anything to do with teaching children how to read, and it never really did, but all I can wonder is they must have been somehow compelled to do it by university administration. But that kind of thing produces in people this hesitance to actually put their real opinion out there. Now, admittedly, I was overkill in anything I ever did. So the quality I put in was always more than was necessary for my assignments, and I did put my real opinions out there quite frequently, but my mentality was if I got anything that looked remotely like my grade was punished, I was going to wage war against the college itself. Now, to the credit of the university I attended, I never once ran into an occasion where I even remotely felt like I was unfairly graded on anything due to racial considerations or otherwise. But there were times I would have arguments with a professor openly in class, and I would have some of my cohort members privately tell me that they were thankful for saying what they were afraid to say. So the whole environment at colleges is just downright suppressive in general. To find out that there are people doing grading like this, it's only going to reinforce the image that the entire institution of colleges, it's leftist captured. Leftist ideology believes that in the oppressor paradigm, and in their mind, the oppressor are whites and white males in particular. So it is unfortunately something we are just going to have to be wary of. Because other than routing them out of those positions that they've come to occupy, positions which they use to make sure that conservatives don't come up in those same institutions, there's nothing to be done about it.
But even then, would they grade a student? I guess a lot of black kids couldn't even go to school, so there's that. But let's say that you belong to a family that did send their children to school. Would that happen? Yeah, anyways. In response, the school is investigating. The situation started earlier in April when Maddie tweeted out. So she tweeted, she's an idiot. I think the reason is because they think they can get away with it. Because
he is absolutely right. They 100% feel secure in what they're doing because they are in these institutions where they are given uniform support for their actions. Because here's the thing. The university is officially punishing her, but guaranteed there is not a shortage of sympathetic allies to her actions. So there are certainly people that silently support what she did, without question. As a side note, one of the tragic things about colleges, conservatives in, much further back when there were far more conservative professors at colleges and the like, they made the mistake of believing that, these ascending leftists were acting in good faith and that they were going to take good care of the institutions that they inherited, and they were going to promote the same spirit of academia that conservatives had formerly endorsed. The leftists should have never been allowed into any position of influence in any institution ever at any point. It was one of the worst civilizational mistakes that any country could make, because once you allow leftists to start getting in, they start selecting for other leftists, and over time the entire institution becomes captured by them. I've mentioned this phrase far too many times in other videos, but the Marxist Antonio Gramsci's Long March Through the Institutions, which is a Marxist concept to be able to infiltrate, subvert, and control pre-existing institutions, has played out in real times over several decades. By the 1960s, there was already far too many leftists in position of influence, and it's only snowballed since then.
anyone would, you would imagine, like, come on, you're not gonna, what you're doing is clearly wrong, but they don't think it's wrong then. Regardless, someone might consider it wrong at an institutional level, so you'd be like, they'll do it in secret. No, they say it on Twitter, on X. So they must really think they can get away with it. The controversial statement from a personal account. Open quotes, let's see the statement. Grading papers for my mentors, and I'm giving these white students a run, sick, for their grade, honey. Denisha Maddie tweeted while using 2 devil face emojis and 1 laughing/crying emoji. The exam is on race, she said. This is despicable. She should be fired at once.
This is so perfectly in line with leftist ideology that it is not reasonable to expect that fellow leftists would disagree with her course of action. Number one, it promotes equity, because in education there is an understood performance gap between, you have black Americans, Hispanics, white Americans, and nobody really cares above anybody above white Americans. They just call them model minorities and then hand wave them away because it's not conducive to the argument that I'm about to address. So if they pull down the whites, they elevate the others, bam, we're all the same now. Even if the actual quality of work is not the same at all, their ideology expects you to pursue from each according to his ability to each according to his need. It is the fundamental underlying principle of Marxism. And that's all equity is the concept applied to that particular philosophy. So and then on top of that, the reason she's fixated on white is because she's in the oppressed-oppressor paradigm that, again, is derived in this particular variation is derived from neo-Marxism because it's based on race as opposed to class. So everything she's done is perfectly within that network of leftist ideology. And it bears keeping in mind, and I've said this before too, just not really harped on it. Leftist ideology has no consistent moral or ethical foundation. In fact, pursued to its ends, it is thoroughly Machiavellian. That's why those significant leaders that did accomplish power and instituted as close to real communism as they could reasonably get, such as, Lenin, Stalin, Mao, they were very clear that they were an ends justify the means type. It wasn't nuanced moral positioning. There was no set of values and principles that they were conscientious of adhering to. It was straight down the line Machiavellianism. And Machiavellians do not have a set moral compass at all. They can do whatever they feel they need to do if it accomplishes their ends. So once you begin to understand both what the objectives are that they're trying to accomplish and the absolute vacuum of any moral decency, you begin to understand that leftism in all its incarnations is fundamentally anti-civilization and anti-human.
And this should be marked into her resume/CV. Awful. Oh gosh, I'm so tired of this nonsense. The Chicago School of Professional Psychology related a public statement on their official website, which announced that they were aware of the situation.
So, these people that have to punish her, they might be leftists too. But it's one of those, they will make sacrifices as necessary. It is possible that there are some people that are leftists that try to invent their own morality, and then within the context of their own morality that they've created, because it can never be based on anything. It's certainly not theologically derived, which is why the overwhelming number of communist countries are strictly atheistic, and to what extent they tolerate religion at all, it is strictly regulated. So they might invent their own morality, or maybe they find appeal in something like secular humanism, which is, again, entirely made up in the minds of whatever person chooses to call their particular moral code secular humanism. So they might actually feel like they need to do something, but at that point they'd actually be a traitor to the leftist cause because, well, they're not helping to advance the ends that they believe any means are justified towards.
Well, good for the school. Good for Chicago. Are you guys from Chicago? It's cool. That is discrimination. That is racism at its finest. You're absolutely right. The school said that, not to mention it's unjust. So you're giving them a run. So the test is about race, and you are decreasing the marks of students who are white, regardless of what they say. So even if they regurgitate, she's not saying because they were wrong, but even if they regurgitate what you want them to hear, you still gotta grade them lower because they're white? That's disgusting. I say, as a former professional teacher, that wouldn't fly. How?
Clearly, as an educator with any sense of morals and ethics, it would not fly. But that's usually because, well, any educators in Western civilization that have morals and ethics, if they're not Christian themselves, they tend to be Christian adjacent. So even if you're atheist, those morals and ethics you do have tend to end up being roughly similar to what your ancestors would have had anyway. Now, of course, there's exceptions. I mean, the moment you start straying away from that, you have the potential to just make it up as you go along. But to some extent, you'll be constrained by the cultural environment you find yourself in. So if you're in a country that's dominantly Christian, you're going to end up with a moral and ethical model closer to it, because if you try to buck it too hard, given societies are an auto-regulating mechanism, you'll end up getting clamped down on for not conforming to expectations.
She could think, but then again, I say, how could she think that this would fly. But universities do it all the time. You clearly, so that's probably why she thought in this current environment, I can actually see why she thought that she could get away with it. She probably thought she was going to be praised for it. Maybe she could have received a raise as well.
I guarantee she received praise from it from fellow leftists because she was fighting the good fight. She was sticking it to the oppressor.
What she was expecting, because there are plenty of professors that tell you, and I swear I have a video dedicated to this, Asian American professor, 1000% ultra progressive. So left wing, not even left wing, radical, even from the perspective of liberal. And she wrote this book all about like white bad, white this, white that. And she said that she was going around universities making all sorts of classes where she was teaching how all forms of racism are because of white supremacy, including when white people are not even in the present in the...
For a leftist, the truth of their narrative does not matter. Because again, it comes back to the ends justify the means. So if you have a leftist that invents a narrative that all forms of racism are in some way related to whites, what matters not is the truth of the claim. You can attempt to dress that claim in some kind of truths. There might be full truths, half-truths, outright lies. Doesn't really matter. The purpose of the claim is to damage the oppressor. So whether it's real or propaganda, it is permissible to a leftist. So yeah, this so-called extreme leftist he's referring to, it's just consistent with what they are and always have been.
In the occasion. So she was literally saying, again, I have a dedicated video and I expose her. She was literally saying, so we saw that in New York during the pandemic, there was some racism against this Asian man, an elderly man that was tackled and pushed by a big black guy who literally cracked his skull. And he's like, yeah, that is a racist thing. And the reason is obvious. It's white supremacy. And I'm like,
yeah, truth does not matter. The purpose of the narrative is all that matters. And the narrative will always be directed against the oppressor. Because in order for leftists to accomplish the world they believe ought to be, they have to subvert the existing power structures, which are presumed to be controlled by the group they believe is the oppressor. So they have to destroy them by any means necessary so they can be the ascendant ones to the top of the new power hierarchy. And then in turn, hypothetically, they begin to erect the utopia that they believe exists on the other side of Marxism. It's all a wonderful concept in theory. It's just we know how the practice actually goes, and if the proof of the pudding is in the eating, then they're not going to get to eat any pudding because they'll be starving to death.
Like, what? So she was literally blaming white people for black on Asian crimes based on racism, and that's taught at university level with all the university staff doing, oh, absolutely.
Think about it. Most young minds do not have a firmly established epistemology in their mind. They are extraordinarily malleable. They're just going to accept information as given. They're not going to be overly invested in investigating the truth of these claims. And there's an argument to be made that they really shouldn't be wasting their time with that to some extent, because you're supposed to assume that in a healthy civilization, that those that are wiser and more experienced are passing down genuine knowledge and wisdom to those that are following after them. In facilitating this transfer of knowledge and information, presumably eventually that next generation would be better than the ones that came before. So the assumption that they're not trying to mislead you is with good reason. Unfortunately, those that are, well, on the outside looking in as it is, we know that these individuals are actually just purposing these students toward their own ideological ends, that for many of them, they believe they would be the ones that would be getting to control the levers of power when all is said and done. Because if there is one group of people that believes themselves wise enough and competent enough to effectively govern all of humanity, despite the fact that they do not in fact possess any skills of actual relevance to being a leader, it's educators. So that is why you'll find the most arrogant, ardent Marxists in universities, and it's because they are so sheltered off from what world is really like, and they're able to just sit there and cultivate their pet ideologies to their liking, and dictate them to a room full of compliant students that don't really have a choice in the matter. They develop an ego that grossly outstrips their abilities. So naturally, when the ego gets that big, they think they should be the leader of everything.
White people awful. Yes. So brave, so courageous. So clearly in this environment, I'm glad that this school is acting more professional than the majority of universities at this point, in the West at least. Let's go. The school said that Maddie was affiliated with them and noted that Maddie's personal tweet, open quotes, runs counter to our internal policies related to grading as well as our core values, close quotes. Based Chicago school. Based Chicago school.
Don't give them credit for based. If they didn't work to snuff this out, they'd be facing potentially massive lawsuits. To a certain extent, the immediacy of the need to continue having your institution or occupying your institution supersedes immediate ideological concerns that you might have in the form of failing to support this lady that did what she did. So no, they're not actually based. They're just understanding she is a necessary sacrifice at this point. And in order to continue doing what they're doing, they're going to have to let this useful idiot go.
Ooh. Wow. The Chicago school does not agree with or condone such sentiments or behavior. When I wish you would have specified what sentiment we're talking about, I understand that you're scared that they're going to burn the place to scorched earth, but it's anti-white sentiment. I can say it. I'm going to say it. It's anti-white sentiment. Next. Several actions have been taken in response, wrote the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. To date, that woman, by the way, the associate teacher requires professional help. I would suggest, rather than a psychologist, a psychiatrist. To date, the post has been removed, and we have started our internal processes to address the situation. The school says the university policy relates to grading is very clear, and that our faculty members are responsible for reviewing and submitting final grades for all students' assignments. Based on the internal review, the school believes that this policy was, open quotes, correctly followed in the incident referenced in the tweet. So basically what they're saying, she was like, you deserve a 2 because you're white. And then they looked at it, but like, no, he didn't do anything wrong. It's fine. It's an...
I'm sure they did what was necessary to cover their butts.
Probably that's what it means. The Chicago School has a 40-year history of respecting individual differences and advancing the principles of inclusion and equality. Hold on a minute. Inclusion and equality and representation are code for anti-white sentiment. So instead of doing this, well, equity is. Equality, in reality, I am pro-equality. I would treat all students based on their individual skills, ignoring completely any ethnic affiliation. So if you have a student and he does a phenomenal job, I'm not gonna consider that after I've reviewed, yeah, okay, wait a second, is he black? Is he white? Is he, I don't know. And then it's the student does a completely wrong thing. Like the dates are wrong. He thinks the Roman Empire happened in the 1800s, but I'm like, right, but he's a minority. And so I'm actually gonna give him an 8. Because he's a minority. And is he gay as well? 9.5. I know I'm grading with Italian. We grade from 1 to 10 in Italy, but that's the point of reference I have. That is counter to equality. In fact, it's more close to equity and DEI positions. Inclusion is the exclusion of white people. I mean, it's just how it is. If inclusion was only about you would want everyone to feel welcome here, fine.
Yeah, he's obviously correct. When they say inclusion, what they mean is pulling in non-whites into positions that were formerly occupied by whites.
No one has anything against that. That's like basic human decency. Well, yeah, there are people that have a problem with that. That's not me. Problem is that this, unfortunately, has become code for excluding. So inclusion is exclusion. Said Dr. Michelle Nealon, president of Chicago School of Professional Psychology. No, said the board that wrote it. We have always been committed to addressing every such issue, as it provides an opportunity for sincere dialogue, I wish, and the further advancement of difficult yet crucial social justice topics. We are
Oh, I thought maybe he'd pause on it. I've been waiting for it because I'd scan ahead and saw the fact that they mentioned the social justice topics angle earlier when he said based. They're not based. This whole thing is exactly what I said it is. They are cutting off that useful idiot who is an ally of theirs because they have to preserve the institution from which they will continue to engage in their Machiavellian agenda to advance leftism. No remotely based person is going to pay even the tiniest lip service to social justice in any manner whatsoever. So they told on themselves with just those two words.
Consistent in inviting and embracing difficult conversations that allow us to advance our missions on topics related to multicultural diversity and inclusion. You absolute clown. First and foremost, okay, look, the school is based. The person who spoke, the spokeswoman, Dr. Michelle Neal, is a clown.
The school is not based, Metatron. I'm telling you, it's exactly what I said. Leftists will absolutely drop a useful idiot that proves inconvenient to them just so they can preserve their agenda. There is no genuine sense of brotherhood among leftists. The moment you're inconvenient to the ends, you're gone.
Because point number one, this isn't a difficult conversation. I know I'm being pedantic. You subscribe to me what you want. You knew from day one. The pedantry is my middle name, so here we are. Anyways, it's not a difficult conversation. Why is she being racist to white people? It's not a difficult conversation. Likewise, if it was a white
This language is designed to assure the other useful idiots that are in support of their overall agenda. By using this exact kind of language, they're trying to put the minds of their ignorant supporters at ease so they can keep them in the fold and potentially, if need be, when they act on their ideology, they would still be there to further their cause. If they prove inconvenient, then they'll be cut off too.
Teacher who was grading black students or was grading Asian students in a different way, and because I'm giving them a run for their marks, ha ha ha. Yeah, it's not a difficult. I would take the teacher and say, "Why are you being racist? Be a professional. What the heck are you doing?" It's not a difficult conversation. It is a difficult conversation because it's a problem since you now have to defend the oppressor class as viewed by your worldview. It isn't a difficult conversation. It's it's a conversation we shouldn't even have in the professional field, but due to the fact that, of course, sometimes you do end up hiring people or having associates and full-on, fully-fledged professors as well before anyone tries to gaslight and say, oh, it's just an assistant. No, it's not. Major professors do stuff like that and worse. So since when it does happen, then you have a problem of professionalism, and it should not be a difficult conversation. It should be a fire her conversation. First and foremost, multicultural diversity. Yeah, tell the racist anti-white teacher about that. Continuing. Based on screenshots from Twitter, Denisha Maddy set her Twitter account private at first, but has since deleted the account entirely. Yeah, of course, because she got the backlash she deserved. 100% deserved. 1000% deserved. Similarly, Maddie's LinkedIn account was also deleted. And we have a picture of Trump for some reasons in the article. Oh, wow. Man, that was insane. The black teacher grades F. Yeah, give him an F. Give him an F. How dare they? The Nisha Maddy, graduate teaching assistant at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, bragged about penalizing white students with lower grades. Hey, where is my uppercase W? Where is my uppercase W here? Earlier this week, Maddy tweeted grading papers.
I'm actually going to go ahead and end it there. The second article he's coming just seems to be more of the same. I thought that this would get to be more about the side of just purely practice as an educator. But I ended up going far more into, how leftist institutions tend to function and how their worldview affects their behavior and what you can reasonably expect from them. One of the things I would strongly advise if you know any institution that is primarily occupied by non-leftists, and you have any access to those people, talk to them and help them understand. Under no circumstances, not even under the spirit of giving them a chance or academic freedom of thought, under no circumstances do you ever allow a leftist into any position of significance or influence, because they are not going to extend that same courtesy to somebody that is conservative, because that doesn't further their ideology, and for them they are ideologically captured and pursuing the dominance of it. And that's just the unfortunate times we live in. If we were in a culturally homogenous environment where the general epistemology and motivating the people was shared, within that window you could have a left and right where both of them genuinely believe in, academic freedom of thought, and, despite the fact that somebody has opposing viewpoints, you believe in their integrity and ability, so you bring them on. But we don't have that luxury. I mentioned the word Machiavellians many times throughout this video. One of their highlighting, or one of the areas about them you can really highlight, is they are very keen on using your principles against you. So they'll appeal to your principles if it helps them get closer to where they go. But the moment that your principles are inconvenient to them, those principles no longer matter to them at all. It's just something to keep in mind. Do note that Machiavellians can come in different political stripes. You can actually run into a non-leftist Machiavellian. It's just that you run into them far more often due to the lack of a moral and ethical foundation on the left. It's less common with people on the right because they have certain values, quite frequently Christian-derived, that do not align with Machiavellianism at all. In fact, it's one of the reasons the Catholic Church clamped down on the prince when Machiavelli wrote it. So, other than that, this was a good video. Support Metatron with likes, comments, subscribes. He's a good man, always done good work. If you happen to like anything I said, like, comment, subscribe. If you dislike or disagree with anything I had to say, leave a comment. I will certainly discuss it with you. Have a good night.